All right, so I've got a 1982 Honda Goldwing here, a GL1100, and the rear master cylinder on the brakes has failed, and I need a new one. So the problem with that is that you cannot buy new ones for this Goldwing. I tried rebuilding the current master cylinder, and it didn't work. So this video is going to show you how to adapt a modern master cylinder onto this old Goldwing. And if we look at this is the Goldwing master cylinder. I've already got this off the bike. And you can see the bolt pattern and how things come out. This is where your brake line would attach there. This is a modern one, which is like almost every bike has something very similar to this, where you've got the bolt pattern where it connects is like this, and it goes in line with the actual cylinder. Whereas this one, you can see the bolt pattern is opposing on different sides of the cylinder, and it so that it kinks this thing or cocks this thing a certain way, whereas this is just a straight shot. You can see how adapting this one to that one might be problematic, and in this video I'll show you how I did it. I now have ordered a cheap master cylinder. My first step is basically to make an adapter to adapt this thing on here so it will fit on the bike. Alright, I was able to get a couple of bolts from the scrap bin here because these are different size. They're about 6mm on the new one, where the old one was like 8mm. So our bolt holes on our frame, one there, they are not going to work on this guy because we're going to have to angle this thing down. So I'm going to use this back bolt hole here. We can use that on the master cylinder here, the back one, but then I got to tilt this down, and we're going to make a bracket that goes from there to the new bolt hole. And my first order of business is to get this in the first bolt hole there, and then angle this down and hook it up to our pedal, which is this right here, and then we'll figure out the dimensions for our bracket. Alright, so we've got our top bolt here mounted on, and I've got it spaced out with just a nut at the moment, just to give it the right spacing. I need some gap in between the master cylinder and the frame just to fit everything. And to work on the custom bracket adapter thing here, I'm going to use a piece of paper and mark out my holes here. Gives me approximately a length there. Alright, so we've got our bracket in here. I'm just sort of testing now at the moment. I've got some random bolts in there. We've got some random nuts and whatnot for spacers on this thing, and it seems to fit in there pretty decently. Pedal will work, all that stuff. It's nice and solid. So I'm gonna go ahead and take it off of here, bench bleed it, get some fluid in there, and then we'll actually connect it to the rest of the brake system and see if we can bleed everything out and get this thing to work. But yeah, you can see now that I've got it off the bike, it's just like an 1/8 inch piece of plate here that I've got some threaded. I've tapped the holes here, so those are, I can thread the bolts right into there, and that's pretty much it. It's very crude at this point. I can shape this thing out better when I'm done, but at the moment I'm just testing stuff out to make sure this works. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and bleed the brakes out again. Moving on, I've got this thing shaped out a little bit so it looks a little nicer. I've got some little spacers that I made on the lathe to go on here. So go ahead and reinstall this, and then we'll test ride it. Alright, so finally we've got this thing sorted out. We've got it on here. Hopefully you can see the little bushings or little spacers I made right there. There's one hip up here, there's one down below right there. Both different sizes, different lengths, in order to get this thing so that it is aligned straight and everything, and then also importantly that it lines up on our little connection here to our pedal on the bottom. Everything seems to be lined up well. So we got that. I need to also shorten this hose here because clearly this is kinked, it's too long, so we need to shorten that out. Alright, so here's my final setup. I've got, and this is not the stock location, I moved mine down slightly. The stock location on most bikes is up in here somewhere. Mine's been moved down, but this gives you an idea. I shortened the hose on here. You may have to do that. It's very simple to clip that off and shorten it as needed. And then I've got the two new bolts in here that match up with my new master cylinder and the adapter I've got in there. And hopefully you can see we've got this one spacer right here. This is just I used a piece of 1/2-inch rod, and I basically drilled a hole through the center of it with a lathe, and that is my spacer in there. And the bolt threads in from the frame through that spacer into the actual master cylinder. And it's a very similar setup on the bottom. We've got, again, another spacer that goes into the master cylinder, but I've got this where the bolt is coming in from the other side and through the spacer and then into the adapter plate, which is this guy right there. So slightly different, and that made it slightly more complicated in getting this spacer the right length and threading it onto the adapter, because the adapter itself is threaded, and then you've got the master cylinder, which is also threaded. So that makes it a little bit hinky, but it worked. And then you've got the spacer, or the adapter, comes up and goes right there, and that lines up with this bolt over here. And so this, again, the adapter, that little plate, is also threaded. So this bolt over here is threading into that plate there, and that's what's holding it on there. And then this all lines up with this guy down here, because you want the pedal, which is that silver part, to be as close, you want it to be within this little section here between this little clevis thing, so that your pedal lines up and everything works smoothly. So that's my setup on this guy. It works really good. This is nice and solid, and everything works the way it's supposed to. Fluid is once again flowing through the master cylinder and back into the reservoir. That was our problem before, was that the stock master cylinder failed, and we were not getting fluid going back into the reservoir. And when the fluid heated up, it was just locking up the rear wheel here. So hopefully this is helpful to somebody and keeps your old Goldwing going. I think you can basically do this with almost any master cylinder. So I just ordered a cheap new one. You could probably order a nice new one as well. That's clearly an option. So, but all of them are pretty much of this similar design.